Scuba Obsessed is the weekly podcast. We talk about all things scuba diving, from cool new gear to places to dive and scuba news. Scuba Obsessed episode 494 is recorded live May 13th, 2021. Welcome back to Scuba Obsessed. I'm Darrin Gilson, coming to you from the southwest side of the great state of Michigan. Joining me this week, we have Mack, the dive mentor. How you doing today, Mack?
Well, I'm doing very well, enjoying the blue skies and pretty nice weather.
Yeah, this is beautiful weather. This is what I would expect for May. We had a little bit of time where it was not the best. We had a little bit of a cold streak going on, and it seemed like it almost went for a full week. And now we're back to it not being so bad. So I'd like to thank everybody who joined us in the chat room. We have a chat room on Discord, and I will try to, with my 9 eyes, keep an eye on it. Now that we've started streaming to YouTube, not really paying attention to the audio stream in there. In fact, the audio, the only way you're hearing it while we record is going to be on YouTube. I'd like to thank everybody with that. This is fourth week number 4, holding up my 4 fingers in front of the camera. This is the 4th week of streaming. Hopefully we get a little bit better. Apologize if you had noticed that even in the podcast we had a little bit of clipping on our audio, and that was a noise gate I had a little aggressively. So I think I've tuned that down. So this is just going to be a little bit of a learning process, but thank you everybody who's sticking with us as we go through this process. Hopefully it'll pay out in the end. It'll be a much better, more interesting product. So let's go ahead and jump right on into the news. So the first article that we have up, as I change my camera angle, is a lawsuit filed in Glacier NP scuba diving death. Missoula, so I'm assuming that's Montana. Family of a teenager who died during an advanced scuba diving class at Glacier National Park last fall filed a multi-million-dollar civil suit against the owners of the dive shop, the instructor and professional diving association that oversees the sport. On November 1st, 2020, 18-year-old Luana Mills signed up for advanced diving class with gull diving in Missoula. The class took place on McDonald Lake. $12 million suit alleges negligence, wrongful death, and inflicted emotional distress. The lawsuit alleges Linnea was diving with a Drysuit when she had not had the proper instructions beforehand and was not trained to use it. Linnea was also wearing a Drysuit that lacked a functional inflator and had inadequate supervision during the advanced open water scuba diving training course. Court papers claim Gull Dive had a duty to assess whether Linnea was competent and sufficiently trained, certified, and skilled to use a Drysuit. The suit alleges Linnea was unable to add air to the inside of her Drysuit due to inoperable inflator and was crushed by the pressure of the water, and she died. The plaintiffs say despite Linnea being in obvious distress underwater, no instructor came to help her. A 112-page lawsuit also filed the name of a fellow diver who tried to save Linnea that afternoon and who has the event recorded on a GoPro video camera he was using at the time of the class. Attorney Dave Concannon also named Professional Association of Diving Instructors for having ambiguous rules regarding instructor qualifications. The suit also alleges the company did not have a permit to dive at Glacier National Park that day. This is the second recent civil suit against Gull Dive. They were also named in a lawsuit over the death of another diver at Canyon Ferry Reserve by renting diving equipment to someone who was not certified to use it. The National Park Service is also investigating her death. MTN News reached out multiple times. The Gull Dive defense attorney for comment has not received a response. And this was recorded by KPAC. Must be a TV station in Missoula and western Montana. And before we get into it, just, it's a tragedy any time someone passes, no matter what the circumstances. And of course, we don't have all the information, but we're going to comment on the information that we do have available. So the first thing about a lawsuit is there's always a lawsuit. Somebody dies, 9 times out of 10, if somebody thinks that somebody can be blamed for it, there's going to be a lawsuit. Not saying that there shouldn't be or should be, but that's kind of how it works. So one of the premises here is that they're talking about that she was giving a defective Drysuit. So that begs the question of why would that have not been caught on the surface? And we're not talking about, there's a leak and that you only discovered it once you're in the water. They're making it sound like it lacked a functional inflator.
Sounds like she had not worn one before.
Right. So this is an advanced open water dive. So you don't do an advanced open water dive until you've passed your basic certification. So you've already gone through your basic certification, and part of this is a training class. And one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mac, if you know, I believe for advanced open water, you learn some more advanced skills, plus you have to pick a couple specialties, which you're going to get trained on. And it can be underwater navigation, it can be night diving, and I believe Drysuit was one of them that you could do. So is Drysuit option?
Well, it's one of those items. One, you don't have to have Drysuit training from an instructor to use one or buy one. Highly recommended, I will suggest,
right,
but not required.
Yeah,
because back in the day when we first started using them, you got your training from the guy you got the suit from. You know what I'm saying? And that's where it was.
Yeah,
like you said, the key item we always talk about, do you have air? Did you check the BC inflator, which she should have had on also? And did she check the inflate and deflate and exhaust valve on your Drysuit?
Yep. So
I'm just curious. With a BC, she had to have a BC. Why was that not inflated to bring her to the surface and get her out of the water?
Right. So what I've done is I've jumped onto the PADI website and I'm just looking. So one of the things for advanced open water is you do have to have some additional equipment that you don't require in regular open water. So a compass is required, a dive knife or some sort of dive tool, specialized gear depending on the adventure dives you choose. For example, you'd obviously use a Drysuit for Drysuit adventure dive. So what that's telling me is that Drysuit is an option for advanced open water training. So they're making it sound like she didn't have training. And of course we don't know all the details behind it, but it is possible that Drysuit could have been one of the trainings she was getting as part of her advanced open water. And as you said, you've got your BC can be an inflator.
No, that's in. The BC is what you use to provide the buoyancy, not the Drysuit inflator.
Right. And I know that's gone back and forth on training. I'm of the mindset, and I'm not an instructor, that you use the least amount of air in your Drysuit and you control buoyancy with your BC. I believe there are some courses that do teach using the Drysuit as a BC for your buoyancy, and not the.
I'd be curious where that is because I don't understand why you would do that.
Yeah, and I can find out.
Yeah, when you have a BC.
Yeah, Derek in the chat room says, if you can be crushed by the water pressure, then wetsuit divers would die. That was something I noticed before the show. I was thinking, and I'm not going to blame that. I'm going to say that's probably the attorney or the newspaper misinterpreting it, because that's one you're not going to want to go the case on, saying you're going to get crushed. Now you can get a squeeze. I mean, you've experienced squeeze, and if you're not prepared for it, and you're liable to panic, which somebody, do they say how many dives she has?
No, it does not. Yeah. I mean, 112-page lawsuit. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, certainly. And it was filed in the name of the fellow diver. So I'm guessing that means that he is not a defendant. He's also considered a victim, traumatized by trying to help this young woman. And then he's got the video. I'm guessing that part of this, they feel that the video is going to help them prove their case. Otherwise, that video would have disappeared.
Yeah, I'd like to know the details of what happened and what really she passed away from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, suit squeeze is uncomfortable, especially for a guy if it's in the wrong place, but you're not going to die from it. It's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
But again, the BC should have got her up to the surface,
yeah.
which would have relieved the pressure from the Drysuit.
And the advanced open water training is a little, it's advanced. It's going to be a little bit less controlled environments. You're going to do some additional skills depending on what you chose. A lot of dive shops recommend that you do open water and then immediately turn around and do advanced, just because they feel that the regular open water doesn't fully give you the skills of many of the situations that you could be in. And you have that additional time with an instructor to help you in your training.
I think the biggest item, though, that most people get the advances, it's supposed to give you the I can go deeper now.
It could.
No, it is.
Well,
basic scuba is not the same as advanced, otherwise you wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
If you got on a dive charter, they want to see that with the advanced, especially if you're going on a deep wreck.
Yeah. Well, because they're thinking that you've had additional time, but you could take advanced. In fact, I finished my advanced open water and had never been deeper than 40 feet. So while it does allow you to, a dive charter may look at that and say, oh, you can go to the bottom of recreational limits. You really need a little bit more training. I'm trying to remember if we even did deep, because deep might have only been 50 or 60 feet. I think
big item, though, is if you're in clear water, that deep part makes a big difference psychologically. In our area, 40 foot in black water and black water in 120 feet that was clear until you got down to the bottom.
Yeah.
It's really relative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The when water's warm, when it's clear, daylight, those are all things that can help somebody feel a little bit more comfortable
and in control.
This is in Montana, so I'm guessing that the water was probably a little chilly, hence the Drysuit. So, obviously we don't have enough information.
Right.
Maybe we'll find more on it. We'll keep an eye out for this to see what comes from it, but I bet there'll be some more before this is done. This article was published May 11th, 2021.
Yeah, it's fresh.
Fresh and new.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how the 100 pages of document says. I mean, without that, we're just guessing by gosh.
Mm-hmm. Well, back to our favorite almost shipwreck, or shipwreck to almost not be a shipwreck that's being disappearing day by day.
Yes.
The Golden Ray's engine section leaves the Isles. This is the Brunswick News, which has done an extensive amount of reporting. I think they've done a good job, and we've covered and linked to them many times over the course of seems like decades now, but it's only been a couple years. It says, undertow the barge 455-7, the shipwreck Golden Ray's severed engine section headed out of the St. Simons Sounds around 10:30 on Saturday. After passing a U.S. Coast Guard inspection for ocean transit, the 6,300-ton chunk of steel known as Section 7 DeSalvers, en route to modern American Recycling Service facility in Gibson, Louisiana, standing on its port side at 135 feet tall. From the barge deck to the sky, Section 7 follows the path that three previous sections removed from the shipwreck: the bow, Section 1, the stern, Section 8, and Section 2 at the fore. By far the most trying of the four circuits in the Golden Ray, Section 7 salvage efforts began in Urgis. Yeah, those Urgis. Ernest on January 27 were not completed until April 24th. In between, solvers employed a strategic retreat from cutting efforts on Section 7 to focus on cutting Section 2. 255-foot tall VB 10,000 cutting chain powered the completed section, cut in 8 days. And then they go on and give some more details about the sections, which we've covered. If you listen back to some of the previous episodes, you can hear us talking about it. But slowly but surely, and it's just impressive. This is a monster machine that is cutting and grinding that up. Just unbelievable.
They said 300 feet of the half-submerged ship remains in the sound.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're past halfway. I think last week we said, are they halfway yet? And it does appear that they are.
Why'd they decide to get the engine part done first, or to get that out?
I'm trying to remember back. I can remember, was it part of it was pinching, and then they replaced the cable, and then I think there was something to do with the barge availabilities. But I have promptly forgotten that level of detail.
Yeah, that's a massive chunk of steel there.
Yep, a big piece.
Yeah.
So, and then another follow-up just from last week. We've covered this in the last 3 episodes. But the artificial reef for Lake Champlain proposal reversed after pushback from environmental groups. A plan to create a Newsly designation for scuba divers in Lake Champlain has been reversed after pushback from environmental groups and the public. The Lake Champlain Transportation Company and the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation plan to sink the Adirondack, a historic double-ended ferry. The concept, known as an artificial reef, was created in the Atlantic off the coast of Delaware and New Jersey by sinking old Coast Guard vessel. Instead of being set underwater to create an artificial reef for scuba divers, the vessel will now be scrapped. The Adirondack is no longer needed since there are others in Lake Champlain ferry's fleet. The decision came after Lake Champlain Committee and the Vermont Natural Resource Council appealed the state permit to sink the ferry. Lake Champlain is a critical diving resource. Considered a public state obtained the NECN, called the project consistent with the public trust doctrine, and laid out a series of expectations. Those included exhaustive cleanup of any oil or other potential pollutants on board. John Groveman, Policy and Water Program Director for VNRC, said the issue doesn't end here since the permit was granted on the grounds that sinking the ferry was in the interest of public good. For something to be in public good, it needs to serve the broader Vermont community. We need to examine the statutes to determine how something like this could have been permitted in the first place. Wow. Who is this Groveman? What, doesn't that just ring of I'm a politician and I think I've got this case that everybody's going to back me up? I really don't have an opinion on my own, but
I'd be curious about the public opinion. Was that verbal, written, writing? And I'd like to see some more documentation for why they decided to do it, and then why they turned it down.
Because what this came from is everybody involved just decided they didn't want the heat, and they're like, okay, we're done. But I would like to know, how much money did they spend to prepare this wreck for it now to be scrapped? So it seems like they have a little bit. So I bet this is going to be in the news again. But as far as sinking it, I think nobody's going to do. And then they said, in the meantime, the legislature is considering a 3-year moratorium on the sinking of any vessels in Lake Champlain. And I think I have another article where there's other vessels in the lake, obviously. I mean, many of these lakes have it. Yeah, the ferry company had planned to sink the vessel after it was thoroughly cleaned of oil, grease, and other potential pollutants would have become part. Yeah, it just became too hot of a topic. And the thing is, there's nobody making money on it. There are a lot of people will say that it's the company doesn't want to have to scrap it, so it saves them money, and while it may, I don't think that's the primary driver because, when was the last time somebody in Lake Michigan actually sunk a shipwreck and we specifically allow it?
I don't think we ever have.
Well, there have been some. Well, you're talking about under the permit program,
Yeah.
under the preserve, but there have been some wrecks legally sunk before we had the preserve system up there at the Straits, and I believe that was in the early '80s.
I know we've had hundreds of abandoned ships
Right.
scuttle along the shoreline that went to hell in a handbasket. That was the standard way of getting rid of stuff.
Yep. Yep. So that one's done. So we can't put a shipwreck down for divers to dive on. But here you go. It's not pretty, but it's important. Residents rally to save a piece of a sunken vessel. So it's perspective. It's what you value and what you care about. So here, a boiler from a schooner that went down off Drumhead NS. Where's NS? Has just sat offshore for a century. The rusting hunk of metal been part of scenery. The water's coast off Drum Island, NS, Nova Scotia, maybe. Residents of small fishing community don't want to see it go. That's a big rusty boiler. It's not pretty, but it's important, Rachel Langley said, who can see what's left of the steamer Nova Scotia from her window. The partially submerged boiler is the only remains of a 42-meter vessel that caught fire and was hauled offshore to sink in 1921. While other coastal communities in Nova Scotia have fought hard to get rid of their derelict vessels, many residents in Drum Island say their boiler has become a beloved landmark. Everyone in the community grew up with it, Langley told CBC Radio Information Morning. They've taken the children there. They have grandchildren there. They're part of our lives the whole time everybody has been here. The boiler sticks out of the water about 3 meters at low tide. It's located at a small inlet of Harbor Island. Locals will dive around the structure to see crabs, clams, scallops that have made their home, Langley said. I know a young gentleman down the road that at least 5 generations of his family have taken their children and taken their grandchildren, something to look forward to with their new children, she said. Langley started a Facebook group called Save the Drum Island Boiler, an online petition that's garnered about 3,000 signatures, or a community of 37 population, so I thought it was pretty good. The Drum Island Boiler is on the list of 14 abandoned vessels that the province has vowed to clean up earlier this year to receive money from the federal government through Transport Canada's Abandoned Boats program. The province has said $593,000 will go to remove the removal effort, which began in is that for the whole program? Is that for the boiler?
No, that sounds like for the whole program.
I'm like,
for 14 vessels.
I'll do it for $450,000. Thank you.
At night, right? Yeah. In a deep fog, yeah. That boiler will be gone. I mean, if they can cart that other engine we just saw,
wow,
it ought to be duct soup to take that baby out.
Yeah. Spokesman for Provincial Crown Corporation declined to interview, but said in a statement the 14 vessels were chosen based on complaints from the public. Vessels considered for removal were brought to the attention of province through a complaint process by individuals who have concerns about the vessels for various reasons, including safety and ethics. Trish Smith in an email to CBC. So the squeaky wheel gets the wreck removed.
But by the same token, if everybody in that area said keep it, then they should be able to go to the province there and look at the complaint process and look at the who suggested it should be removed. I can understand it if it's in a waterway impacting other boats traversing it. You know, they could get fouled in it. If it's in the middle of a shipping lane and you're doing downriggers and netting. But I'd be curious, looking at the 2 pictures that they showed above it, is that 2 other different wrecks that they're going to remove?
Like this one that I've got up on the screen now?
Yeah, I mean, one's in the sand.
Yep.
That shouldn't be really too hard to move, but I don't know what the other one is. Oh, that's a sunken boat.
Yeah.
Doesn't look very big.
Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, I'm a diver. I like to dive on shipwrecks, but these are pretty much trash in an undivable situation. So if you wanted, you
just
could.
Just because they're trash, take a look at what we've been seeing on the beach. You got to dig in the sand to look at it. At least
in,
this, you don't got to dig in the sand.
in pristine condition.
Yeah, it'll almost float.
Yeah, almost float. Yeah,
Well, the picture on the right-hand side, if you dewatered it, I bet that sucker would float.
yeah, maybe. But I'm thinking if it was really it wouldn't be abandoned. Or could
Yeah,
you now say that was floatable and of value? Could you get a permit to take and salvage that?
more than likely.
So you could say it's
But then
abandoned. And
sure. But, just looking at that, it still costs you money. So you got to have a reason to have done it or to do it.
mhm.
If it's you already lost the boat, it's going to cost you more to get it out than it is to recover it. You're going to leave the boat alone.
Yeah,
A diver would look at that and say, just for the hell of it, I'm going to bring that up. You know, put a deep
yeah,
pump in there, bring up some sidewalls just for the challenge.
yeah.
Now, it wouldn't one on the side, you'd burn that sucker. I
But
mean, seriously,
but if
you know where we dive there at the flats up in Sheboygan?
yeah,
That one angle that is now covered over with sand and dirt. When first dove that, and you're talking, I hate to say it, God, that's
careful, you're going
almost
to age
50,
yourself.
almost 50 years ago. There were several boats anchored, or not anchored, but scuttled in that area. They burned the damn things to the ground,
Hmm.
and that's now full of sand. So when some guy builds a house over that one year,
Yeah,
they're going to say, where did this shipwreck come from?
yeah.
Where'd you come from?
Oh,
And that's exactly what it looked like.
they're going to be digging in the sand. He'll find the shipwreck, and then somebody will petition for him to stop the construction so they can dig it up.
Yep. Yep. You can't build a house there. There's a
That's
critical
historic. It's
artifact.
pristine. Let's build a museum on it. The people who haven't listened to the podcast before are just thinking we're jerks. But you got to take it in context, and like these last few articles have shown, is there's different perspectives on value and what people want.
Yeah.
So
Well, what about the boiler? You know what that brings to mind, of course, don't you?
what's that?
Diamond Lake.
Oh yeah.
The boiler.
Yep.
The
So
boiler.
what Mac's referring to is in Diamond Lake, there was and it's a fairly small lake, in the early in the, do my math on the centuries, 20th century. That was a nice resort lake that people from Chicago came to and had houses, and it was a chain ferry, wasn't it? No,
City of Green Bay.
Cit-
City of Green Bay is
City-
what it was.
yeah, City of Green Bay. There is a chain ferry now, but at that time, that was a lot of your small lakes had these little steamboats on it, because you didn't have gasoline engines, you had little steamboats, and boilers had challenges, and that one blew up, didn't it? Was there any loss of life? Do you remember?
No,
City of
not
Green
on
Bay?
that one.
Yeah. So sometimes what will happen is the boiler will get hot, the boat will catch on fire. When the boat can no longer sustain flotation, the boiler hits the water and it breaks apart. Different levels
And
of
then they
explosion.
dynamite it because
Yeah.
they want to get it down and sunk.
Yep.
And then some enterprising divers take all the remnants,
Uh-huh.
take it to a different part of the lake where it's deeper, and reconstruct the
Yep.
pieces.
Yeah. And there's I've heard legends of different beachfront property has parts of the boat and trying to get them back in the water. And
One of my friends from work, if you look at his property,
Mhm.
right where he's putting his dock and pilings in, you'll see metal embedded into the ground that look amazingly like boiler grills.
Yeah.
Because they are.
Yeah.
And the boat itself is maybe a couple hundred yards away from his dock.
Yep. And maybe that's some ideas of some other episodes. We could just take a shipwreck and a story and just highlight what had happened. Maybe these are things that somebody 40 years from now will appreciate the effort to consolidate into some form. So here we go with an underwater memorial for Navy SEAL in Arkansas. They said with Memorial Day right around the corner, Lake, was that Ochita? near Hot Springs, well known for having one of the cleanest lakes in the country. But there's an underwater memorial place tribute to fallen U.S. SEAL Adam L. Brown. Adam's a Hot Spring native and former chief special warfare operator. Had a book published based on his life story called Fearless, the Undaunted Courage and Ultimate Sacrifice of Navy SEAL Team 6, Operator Brown. The memorial is placed on Blakely Dam in the lake on Hot Springs in July 27, 2013 by a group of Arkansas scuba divers. Memorial is accessible both land and scuba divers. Memorial consists of a laser-etched black granite marker, the CPO Adam Brown placed on a large rock, as well as another large stone that contains Adam's favorite Bible verse. The hope that the memorial will stand as a lasting tribute to Adam, as well as inspiration to the diving community. Memorial, known as Fearless Rock, is funded by private donations. From time to time, members of the Fearless Rock dive team place flags, challenge coins, and other items on the memorial. And they're not kidding. There are some. Here's that photo, and this is a website, kkyr.com. That's just not a few challenge coins. That is like loaded with challenge coins.
Yeah. There is, if you have not read the story about that guy, it's quite a interesting story about him. One of the items, you'll look it up, it's called How an Addict Became a Navy SEAL and a Nightmare for the Taliban, because he was a hellion back in the day before he was an addict.
Yeah. I don't know anything about him.
From being an addict all the way up to being a SEAL, changed his life.
Well, I think anybody who can make a SEAL has got to be very impressive in their own right. I mean, that is, I've seen several shows on that and met a few in real life.
Yeah.
They are definitely a special cut of person to be able to go through that training and what they're able to accomplish. And then anybody who served the country in a war conflict status, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Divers unravel lines, mysteries of finding lost fishing gear. So we got a photo here, and it shows a generator and some items. And it says the more you fish from boats, the more likely you're to consign rods, reels, wristwatches, smartphones, boat anchors, and entire tackle boxes to the depths, never to be seen again. And we've certainly seen that gone diving. I think some of the best ones is when you find a tackle box, the lid's on it and it was all closed up. And didn't we find one out there in Lake Michigan?
Actually, we found several. Most people, if they're smart in their tackle boxes, is they leave part of their old fishing license in it. So when we find them, we can actually find the owners, which we have done before. Mm-hmm. We were actually, I think you were out there, and on the Muskegon.
Yeah.
Out of Michigan City, we found a tackle box.
That's right. That's where that was. For some reason, I was thinking it was near St. Joe, but we did find one in the Muskegon.
The Muskegon. Had everything still in it.
Yeah.
Top shut and everything.
Yeah, you, me, and I think Jim Kleeman. Did we also go out there with Bob?
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought Jim got it because I got 2 anchors that day. I thought Kleeman got that, didn't he?
Yeah, I think maybe he did. Yeah, wow. And we're digging back into sometimes. We probably even have a podcast. We talked about it. way probably in the double digits way back then. So the image we got up on the screen, and I think earlier I said I had the image up and I didn't. I'm still learning this video switching. And I said, well, at least you won't be seen by you, but the treasures fall in the water, fished by others. Some might resurface one day in another angler's hands. And they said, how? As waters warm each summer, recreational divers reclaim boatloads of lost fishing gear while combing the lake beds and river bottoms during underwater scavenger hunts. Sometimes we call those ecology dives. In some cases, divers purposely target popular fishing sites after anglers depart, knowing they can be a target-rich environment. More people fishing a hot spot, either through the ice or the open water, the greater the odds someone clumsy or careless is parting with their gear. And that's what I'm guessing, that generator does not look like it's been down there all that long.
Well, no, I mean, back in the day before they started licensing them, It's not unusual in Pawpaw, for example. We dive it after the ice is gone, and we find the ice shanties. And you always like to go in them and find, oh, they still left the reels. Here's the lantern.
Mhm.
Nobody ever had a generator for me, though, but you'd find their wallets. I think the best one we found with a wallet was because it had the Playboy key with it, including his credit card and the Playboy plasticized
Uh-huh.
invite. Nobody, as far as I know now, used it in
Yeah.
his behalf, but you name it, we have found it.
Yeah.
And the largest generator, I'm looking at that one.
Mhm.
Do you remember the one that we brought up off the piers?
Oh, yeah. That was a huge
That
generator.
3,000 something pound one?
Yeah.
That looks new. You could probably make that one work.
Yeah, that's less than a year, and I'm betting
Yeah.
because there's like this bottom rail here doesn't have any silt on it,
Yeah, nothing.
and there's a little bit on the top, but that's probably just. I bet this came down early. You know, that was in a shanty, get plopped down, and then that's just from stuff stirring from it hitting the bottom, and then any sediments that was on the ice as it melted.
Yep.
So it looks like a first year find. And then that's Tamara Thompson is the photo credit who does some amazing photos. And she's referenced here several times in this article. So we have full links in the show notes. It says, I don't do it every day, but yep.
I was going to say that if you ever went up to the Shipwreck Festival, the Ghost Ships, you would see Tamara there, because she was a marine archaeologist there at the Wisconsin Historical Society.
Yeah. Yep.
You'd see her there.
Yep. Very active. It says, I don't do it every day, but it's something different to do for fun, Kruger said. We find fishing rods, baits, lures, anchors. If I could, I'd clean them up and get them working. We would sandblast or pressure wash the anchors and sell them cheap. We made just enough to get air refills for our diving tanks. And there's a lot of divers who have what we call them anchor gardens.
Yeah, you might say I have some of those. I think Larry has the biggest anchor, though.
What that one? How big is that one?
That's big as Larry.
big as Larry.
Yeah, it's very, very heavy. It took us quite a while to get that out of the river.
Yeah. That's another story that we should
yes,
maybe do. We could do something on that one. Kind of the legendary finds.
I have an idea where it came from, though.
Oh, okay.
I'll have to show you the picture.
Yeah.
Right there where the bridge is, we found it on the opposite side of the bridge.
Yeah.
All right, that used to be the parking area on that side for the Navy training boat from Chicago. Or ship, I should say.
Okay.
And the only thing I can figure is they let their anchor go, and either they had it in a barge and they brought it forward so it'd catch, and then got it snagged. Because when we got it, it was covered in clay. I mean, it was just one part of a fluke. It took us a long time to dig that out. But that's the only thing I can figure that would take a anchor that large is one of those training vessels.
Mm-hmm. And so you think somebody goofed one way or another?
Yep.
So did they?
But the only way they could have.
So did they?
The boat could not go through there to get to where we got the anchor.
Okay, so it fell off a barge then. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we'll have to come up with something. Sharing that, maybe get some photos from Larry. Yeah, and in other cases, divers like Tamara, maritime archaeologist, Wisconsin Historical Society, have to clear the wrecks of lost fishing gear before taking the tack to brought to the site. Thompson recalls diving a schooner barge transfer, relatively obscure 200-foot ship where its owner intentionally sank it in Lake Michigan off Milwaukee in 1923. Thompson said the transfer was split down the middle, both sides of the hull lying 120 feet of water like two parallel football fields. The shipwrecks go to the untrained eye. The transfer is about as dull a wreck as you can find. Further, no one died with it and didn't disappear into a hellish November storm with 40-foot waves. Its owner, the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company, simply replaced it with another vessel. Workers then recovered everything of value from the transfer, towed it 6 miles out, cast it adrift, rammed it 3 times until it sank. Now, that's wow. Isn't that how you get 2 shipwrecks?
I was going to say ramming it is not always a good thing.
So that was kind of like somebody with their new toy going, see what I can do. Wow, rammed it. Yeah, I was going to ask when I read that earlier, as that was a prescribed method for sinking stuff. When Thompson and 3 other divers descended on the transfer 2 years ago to study it, they found it coated in fishing tackle, snagged from passing salmon trawlers. Luckily, divers hadn't been down there for years because it was covered with monofilament lines, fishing lures, downrigger wires, downrigger weights the size of softballs. The entire downrigger tore loose from the boats, Thompson said. We also found some electronic thing fishermen used and got it running again. He said their 4-person team worked 10 hours wrapping up line, picking up lures, packing a crate to haul everything up to their boat. We figured we had at least $500 to $600 worth of gear off the one shipwreck. It took all of our power and strength to get it into the boat. Downrigger weights are really heavy. That would not have been my technique. I mean, I can see putting it all together makes it easier, but you got to get that in.
Yeah,
and you may have floated it, and then and they're. I'm guessing they took bits and pieces out of the crate till they got it light enough to haul on. I mean, that's because downriggers, I know what you're talking about, and they're not exaggerating. They say softballs. And when somebody loses a downrigger like that, they are ticked. What'd you say? That's over $100 for some of those downriggers.
They're anywhere from usually 5. I think I've seen some at 11, 12
okay.
pounds of lead.
Okay.
So, but then again, you got some of the plasticized ones that are a good bit more.
Well, and some of them have adjustments for, adjusting it to track at different depths.
Well, those are clips, but you'll find them on the line that's attached to the downrigger. We used to go out to Cook Plant back in the day. They have 3 major large structures for their intake systems. And we'd go out there in April before the workboats got out there, and we would get dozens of downriggers because they had protective barriers around them. So they would be running their lines out, hit that barrier, and rotate, which would then break the lines. And the best find I ever found was the back end of a boat that was bolted to the top deck with 4 reels, electric reels for downriggers. They all must have caught simultaneous because they ripped that off the back of the boat. That was a very good find.
Well, I'm seeing that photo that we had at the beginning of the article. It says, according to the book, Our 4 Lakes, The Legends, Sights, and Secrets, a shanty went down with all the gear and accessories, including an AC generator, big screen TV, Xbox, satellite dish, power auger, rods and wheels, XLR fish finding unit. That is a little bit of money.
I'd have been out there the next day getting that stuff.
Wow.
Holy smoke. Yeah, that would have been worth getting a diver,
right,
$100 an hour to go down and get your gear back. Come on.
I'd have done it for $95. Kruger said one search for perch fleets, fishing tackles led to more fascinating find on Mendota, and 20 feet off the Marshall Park, a 22-foot homemade motorboat carried 5 young men to their deaths in 19. Ooh. That is pretty sad. Kruger said searching the bottom with Dave DeYo, his brother-in-law, in September 1998. And DeYo found the unique bubble-bowed boat in the bottom. The boat had a propeller in one end, a long shaft going to the engine, a fuel tank on the other. They contacted Donald Sanford to investigate the find. Sanford was working on a book that became 1/4 Lake, A Social History of Lake Mendota. After spending several days combing Wisconsin State Journal's archives, Sanford found the article from August 19, 1929, describing the the tragedy. A man named Barney Davidson had built and kept a boat at his cottage in Spring Harbor in Mendoza's southwestern corner. Davidson invited 4 visitors to go on a boat ride in a rough, windy day. No one knows how the accident happened, but the wave apparently washed over the transom when the boat lost power or suddenly slowed. The boat swamped and all 5 men drowned. Kruger said the discovery led divers to 3 of the 4 other sunken craft nearby. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
A lot you can find. A good article. Waterton Daily Times had that one in there, written by Kevin Wilson. Then Bonterra Mine. We've been hearing more about them in a while. There was some times where we weren't sure they were going to reopen. There was lawsuits going on.
Yep.
None of these are saying what happened, and we need to have somebody on. I think Dave Toneman knew some of the backstory, had heard it. So some of these images are courtesy of West End Diving, Bonne Terre Mine. Tucked away in a small town, Bonne Terre Mine is home to the world's largest subterranean lake. It continually to be a high visit destination for tourists and scuba alike. Before the mine was developed in 1860, Native Americans discovered the galena lead in the area so plentiful it could be found above ground. Galena could be turned into ammunition or shot, among other uses. Native Americans uncovered its value, but not until the French colonized the area to the true extent of the resources unearthed. The mine was developed in 1860, spanning 5 levels, supplying a great deal of the lead used during the Spanish-American War and the Industrial Revolution. It was an active mine until 1962, when the machinery had become outdated. Most of the lead had been extracted. It was not long after this that Douglas and Catherine Georgian saw an opportunity to breathe new life in the old mine. Because the pumps had previously kept water at bay and been turned off, 3 of the 5 levels of the mine had been submerged by crystal clear water. Features lend to a singular opportunity for miners to offer both walking and boat tours, as well as scuba diving and diving certifications. And they go in and talk about a lot of detailed statistics, like 15,000 scuba divers a year and anywhere from 20 to 30,000 tourists visit. Jacques Cousteau had gone there, only planned on spending a half a day, and I think he was there for 4 or 5. And you've been there, Mac, haven't you?
Yeah, many times back. A long time ago. I haven't been there in over 20 years, though.
Yeah. Now that the kids are out of the house, I need to put this in the calendar because this is a good winter dive, for us up here in Michigan.
That's why we always used to go in February. And this was way before they had they have a lighting system in there now.
Mm-hmm.
They have the tour boats. That was way before that. But it was, and if we're used to colder water. Some people who want to do a Drysuit in there, that's a drag. They're going to get hot. But wetsuit is fine. It's 50 something, 58, 60 degrees. And it was really clear. It was a good dive, good diving. But back then you could you could go and take your own scooter and do scooter tours. And if it wasn't a busy day and you got a adventurous type leader, you could go places that were not on the normal path, especially if you paid a little more.
Yeah.
To the divers.
They had some beautiful photos in this article.
It's a nice place. I really enjoyed it. But I think we got to go to places that they don't go anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then there's a lot of dive shops that do tours. I know Divers Inc. Rich Shenowic's dive shop does it. And I think he's been on talking about it, where you start at course 1 and you have to incrementally go up.
Yep.
So if you can't go there and start in course 9, you got to do 1, then 2, then 3.
They don't call it course; they call it trails.
Trails.
Yep. Yeah. Everybody had to go through trail 1 first, and part of it made sense though, because one of it was a tunnel that you had to go through the tunnel before you had access out. Some people got a little freaky. Number 2, a lot of people didn't like, but the lead guy had the light. The guy in the back had the light. All you guys in the middle, us, had to follow where they went. because you don't need 6 guys out there all with flashlights doing their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you usually don't get to have flashlights.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You did not, because I wanted to control it, and the best way is the only people who got the lights are the diver instructors or the
Yep.
tourists,
Yep.
tour divers.
So, yeah, it's got to be on my list to go and figure out how to get down there. So maybe we can just it's got to plan it. I mean, that's kind of the trick to diving is you have to put it on your calendar. You have to decide that you want to do it, make plans, get some friends together.
They had a bread and breakfast place down there when we went the last time, and we just took that place over.
Yeah.
I mean, we had good food, good places, and it was not rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to dive, you dive 2 days on Saturday at least, and 2 on Sunday to get, make the most of your time.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have been down there at least once. The only problem I would do if I were them, they've got a shaft that goes from the top down. I would put an elevator there for the gear because that's they say 65 steps. This seems a lot more than that when you're getting old.
Little more than
all in your freaking yep. And back then we had our weights and our tanks. Well, now they have tanks down there, so you don't got to worry about that. But as I get older, that if they had an elevator, I'd pay extra just to use that for the gear.
Well,
I'd walk it, but that gear, man, kick my butt. Carrying a scooter, come on.
Yeah, so I think we need to bring our own Sherpas. Can we do that?
They actually did that at one time. They had a scout troop.
Oh, there you go.
And there's another story to that that we won't go into. That's why they don't do that no more. But yeah, you could still do something different.
Very nice.
It's worth a trip. You really ought to go.
Well, another place, this one's a little bit more in our backyard, Haigh Quarry has been listed among the country's best. This is one of those articles I had found a few weeks ago. And this is a detailing a part of that article. A national publication recently revealed what the scuba diving community has known for quite some time. Haigh Quarry is one of the best. USA Today newspaper named Haigh Quarry one of the best spots in a story on April 19th on 10 great places to go scuba diving right here in the U.S., even in the Midwest. The quarry at 2738 East 2000 North Road in Kankakee, just east of Bradley, is listed as Coral Reef State Park, and Key is listed with Coral Reef State Park in Key Largo, Florida, Casino Point in Catalina Island, California, Black Rock Point, Maui, Hawaii, and Puget Sound in Seattle. I was shocked, said Tina Haig, owner of the business. A friend of mine called me and said, "You're not going to believe this, but you're listed among the 10 best spots in the USA to scuba dive." I thought, you got to be kidding. So I looked up the article, and sure enough, we were in there, and we were in there with Hawaii, really in the middle of cornfields. When people, particularly from Chicago, come in, they just remark how peaceful it is out here, no hustle or bustle. Haigh Quarry has been that peaceful spot for 30 years. When Tina and her husband Jim opened the business in 1991, Jim purchased a former limestone quarry several years before. It was up for auction, and my husband at the time had 3 businesses, and he had a spot to dump all the trees he had removed. He said the stone company had pumps over at the south end, and he decided to unplug the pumps, and it filled up naturally. He brought in a 78, which was decided to use for our family for recreational purposes. The friend suggested an open up a scuba diving business. Haig did her own marketing, contacting scuba diver shops to offer her facility for divers to use, to explore, and the rest is history. It's now word of mouth, and it's grown tremendously. Haigh Quarry has grown to having a full dive shop, use of its facilities, to having dozens. We opened it up with one dive store using the facility, strictly since we don't know what we were doing. And then the next year it worked out for a couple of years, and we decided to open it up to other dive stores. Approximately, we have about 60 different dive stores and independent instructors that use the facility for training. And then we have recreational divers that just come in for the fun of it. They come from 7 different states. Most divers from the greater Chicago area, from Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Missouri. From May through September, Haigh Quarry is open 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Friday and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday, and it's closed on Tuesday. And by the way, they're not paying a spot. It does feel like an ad. Entry fee for certified divers is $25 per day, $10 for non-divers. Haigh Quarry has everything you need to scuba dive, rental equipment, items, complete package. $80 per day or $135 for two. And then they go into some scuba classes and other things. But have you dove there, Mac?
No, I have not. I have not been to
Oh,
it.
wow.
I know several people who have.
Yeah. Well, I went there with Kurt and Bob. We did a dive. I think it was in the fall one year. Unfortunately, there was a tragedy there that weekend, but not with our team, fortunately. But it was a nice dive spot. There was, being in the fall, leaves had started to fall in, so you kind of had some tannic going on there, little tea staining near the edges. Visibility was kind of off and on. Some spots you only had a couple feet. I think it was starting to get cold, so algae was dying a little bit, so you had to particulate in the water. We didn't do the whole lake, but there was a boat, kind of like a little cruiser that was out there that we went on, and they had like a little trail where you could go between items. But it's certainly a nice spot. I recommend it if you're in the Chicago area, and you're not going to go out in the Lake Michigan. Haigh Quarry is a good spot to go.
And it's not real deep. I think 55, 60 feet is the depth.
Yeah.
It can get cold, meaning like in April, this time of year even.
Yeah.
The surface may be 57, 58. Get down there at 50 feet and it's 38 degrees.
Yeah.
It gets chilly real quick.
Because we've got France Park, which is in Indiana, and that one doesn't get any below or any. I don't think it's deeper than 30 feet at the deepest spot. So this one does do a little bit deeper. It's a nice spot. Where we're at, you can either do Haigh Quarry, France Park. You can go to the east side of the state, and down in Ohio. And then you got Gilboa, and then you've also got White Star. So some nice quarry diving. That's good. That's good Midwest diving if you don't like to do wreck diving in the Great Lakes. And there's sometimes blowout spots. If you want to get a dive in that weekend and the big lake's not behaving, then you can come into these and get some nice dives in.
Yeah.
Oh, here they're saying the quarry encompasses 13 acres, the deepest depth of 80 feet. So they must have like a hole out there. A 33-foot cabin cruiser and a 1962 fire truck. I don't remember if I saw the fire truck. Some rock crushers, drills, conveyor belt, which is mining equipment that's probably left over from operational.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the ones we used to dive years ago, Salisbury Quarry was a big one for U of M. And I dove out there a lot. And then when I lived on that side over in Monroe and towards Detroit, they had a lot of quarries that they took rock and sand and stuff out when they were doing the bypasses and interstates. And we dived those because anything near a train track and or dirt road, you would always, always, always find cars in it. And people then, of course, would bring their dump out there. You'd find metal, you'd find 50-gallon drums of something. And we always knew that when you go to an area like that or a quarry and you got weeds and fish on one side and you go to the other and it's like nothing, there's a reason for that. And you don't want to play with the drums. You don't want to, I mean, they had coils of, the kind of rebar you put in concrete.
Yeah.
That wide stretch. That comes in huge rolls. Well, one of the quarries, we found many rolls of that. And it's like, if the little catch that lets that uncoil were to erode and you hit it wrong, well, that thing go chink. Because if it did, you'd be royally screwed.
You'd hope that it would have corroded enough that there was no strength left in it, but I don't want to be the one to find it. Yeah,
and these were not coated. This was a long time ago. This is 70s and early 80s. But, you'd know where not to dive. I mean, because some of them still had the little carts they'd have with a little rail system.
Yep.
And back then, nobody thought about bringing them up, preserving them. It'd be cool, though.
Would be. Well, you want to swim with the sharks voluntarily? Maritime Aquarium looking for volunteer scuba divers. The aquarium in Norwalk is looking for experienced scuba divers to join the volunteer team. Volunteers will help make public education presentations multiple times a week inside a 110,000-gallon shark tank, which is home to its 7 to 9 foot sharks. To be eligible for the aquarium dive team, volunteers must be at least 18 years old, have open water certification or equivalent experience, log at least 25 open water dives, Divers Alert Network DAN insurance, current first aid and CPR certifications, signed physician's clearance to dive, ability to pass swim and scuba assessment, offered offsite at Velo CT in Norwalk in June. Volunteers will be asked to commit to at least 12 4-hour shifts per year. Weekends and weekday shifts are available. Scuba presentations had been put on hold due to the pandemic, but the aquarium wants dive team ready when they bring the program back. So that's not a big requirement. 25 open water dives, that's not too hard for somebody to get. Yeah, it's very doable if you were so inclined and wanted to do that. You could do that in a few months. And if you are interested in that, now this just happens to be at this Connecticut area. You can, other aquariums just about them, like here in the Midwest, we got Sheds Aquarium in Chicago. I know there's some large municipal aquariums in Indiana and Kentucky. They're all looking for divers. So if you're interested in this, contact that aquarium, ask to know what their diving volunteer program is like. And hey, some nice clear water there, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say that many, many years ago, one of the individuals who worked at Wolf's Dive Shop worked in the aquarium like this. And he says the experience is awesome because you learn so much about the fish.
Yeah.
He said if you get a chance to do it, but he said you've got to put, you've got to give them a year's worth of effort.
Yeah. Yeah, because I do think that they require you use their gear. So you have to put in enough time for them to kind of recoup their investment in what gear they're going to get or what gear you're going to use. And I didn't think that 12 4-hour shifts was that much. So you figure, that's one half day a month you're going to do. Yeah, maybe someday.
Well, it takes a lot of work to, just clean off those screens and the windows.
Yeah.
Or, the partitions are just to wash those down. A lot of work.
Well, see, maybe they would let me in with my wetsuit. Mine's already fine.
Yeah, you'd be fine in that.
Yeah.
The sharks and stuff go, wow, that's not rubber I smell. That's flesh.
Yeah. Go get them. Boy, we had a full docket there.
Oh, yeah.
So that does it for Scuba in the News. Wow. And still have five people in the chat room hanging out. So I think that's pretty good. Kind of a record since we've done the streaming. That doesn't include our Discord chat members, which I have completely ignored Discord. I need to pop in over there, see if anybody's doing anything. Oh yeah, they do. They're doing well. So thank you, Derek, and he's been pasting in the show notes. And then some of the discussions in there are better than what we've got here.
They can just do the nice sidebars.
Yeah, they got all that. Well, let's see, Mac. Do you have a dive safety story for this week?
Well, I have one, but it's a little long. I don't know. Well, we've been talking about the experience of divers. So this is called Experience and Risk. It's also out of Dan, and it's a couple of years old, but it's still, we always talk about training and experience. So we'll talk about experience and risk. Although it's clear the diving experience reduces divers' risk of injury, Experience is an imprecise term that brings up different ideas in different people at different times. Now, in contemplating how experience reduces risk, you need to consider the following items. Training provides experience. Practice provides experience. Diving itself provides experience, but not all experience is helpful. And if some factors are present, experience can increase the risk. And people are going to say, well, say what? What do you mean by that? Well, training provides experience. As much as we like to say there is no substitute for experience, there actually is a substitute. It's called training, and it's a good thing. You wouldn't want to learn through experience that you shouldn't hold your breath while scuba diving. And if you did, you wouldn't do it more than once, not if you were at depth. Training lets us benefit from the sometimes painful and deadly experience of others. And that's why it's the first step in becoming and growing as a diver. But we must be learning to learn from others' experience. Said, human beings who are the most unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others are also remarkable for their apparent disinclination to do so. I think we've seen that. Now, practice provides experience. During training, and one hopes outside of training, divers practice skills during emergency and including emergency procedures. This practice gives us experience in a controlled environment, controlled circumstance, that we can mess up and learn from our mistakes. And then we do it and try again till we succeed. And we don't get hurt. We actually don't get hurt. Now, fortunately, the brain does not readily differentiate between simulated circumstances and reality. Therefore, if you're trained, when faced with the real things, people do as they're trained and practiced. And the more realistic and varied the practice, the better the response. This outcome assumes that you actually train and practice. And I think from our last pool party, we realized there's a lot of people who haven't practiced some of the skills they had in basic training. Dolphin Don is for one. Now, there's a instructor and rebreather designer, Kevin Gurr, once said, practice a skill on every dive. By that, he meant an emergency skill. Following his advice is easy and takes little time. Divers can also gain experience by simulating, in the scope of their training, and managing realistic emergencies in confined water. Another instructor and explorer, Phil Short, said, I do it when I don't have to, so I can when I do. And that does make a lot of sense. Diving provides experience. Well, absolutely. Diving provides experience. It's hard to get through instruction. This is what we really mean when we say there's no substitute for experience. By going diving, we subconsciously learn normal patterns, how things are supposed to be, what we're supposed to do in different circumstances, and in different underwater environments. When something violates our self-conscious expectations, we go on alert, sometimes acting and reacting intuitively, even before the problem occurs. Now, numerous examples of this intuition in different endeavors. One example they documented involved an experienced firefighter. He led a crew into a house to fight what seemed to be a routine kitchen fire. They sprayed the fire, but almost immediately it roared back to life. Uneasy, the commander ordered his crew out. Moments later, the floor collapsed as a huge, undetected fire in the basement engulfed the structure. Everybody would have died if they'd have stayed in the house a moment longer. Now, right after the close call, those involved often say they didn't know how they knew something was wrong, they just did. Deeper analysis commonly finds multiple subtle pattern deviations that even trained people may not have noticed consciously, but their subconscious apparently did. The lead firefighter saw and said he saw no threat, but somehow knew something was terribly wrong. Examination later found that besides the fire roaring back to life, the room was much hotter than it should have been, and the men reported it was unusually quiet. The hidden fire was muffled in the basement, and unconsciously, these patterns, these mismatches, warned the commander. So experience will keep us out of trouble if we allow it to. In other words, if something doesn't feel right when we're diving, don't wait to find out why. Trust your intuition and act accordingly. Now, we said a moment ago, not all experience is helpful. It's not just the quality, but also the quality or quantity. It's also the quality of the experience that counts. Now, we need enough repetitive experience to learn patterns, but beyond a certain point, more doesn't benefit us. Now, consider two divers, one with 1,000 dives, one with 200 dives. The first is an open water diver who has made all 1,000 dives on about a dozen shallow tropical coral reefs, and all from a boat in a wetsuit wearing an aluminum 80 cylinder. Now, the second diver has about 50 dives on similar reefs, 40 dives in kelp, 20 dives in cold water reservoir, 15 dives in the river, 20 dives in the Atlantic on wrecks, 20 and 25 or 25 in Florida Springs, and the rest inland quarries and off the Florida Gulf Coast. Now, the second diver is certified as an advanced open water diver, cavern diver, rebreather diver, Drysuit diver, and does a dive from boats and shore, including through the surf. Which diver has the most useful experience that will help reduce his risk, especially when visiting a new environment for the first time? Sounds to me like that guy with 200. It's like, did you do the same dive 1,000 times, or did you do 200 different dives?
Right.
And which one did you going to learn from?
Mm-hmm.
Now, experience can increase your risk because cautious of normalization of deviance, which can be summed up as getting used to not following your training because nothing bad happened. And I think we can see that sometime when we maybe get out into the river and we suck our tanks a little dry because nothing bad happens out in the river. Well, we do that because it's a norm for us when we do the wreck diving, when we do a deep dive. Hopefully not. Now, if somebody violates a safe diving practice, exceeds training limits, omits standard gear, skips the checklist, and nothing goes wrong, there's a greater likelihood the person will violate these same practices again. Experience makes this worse because repetition without negative consequences makes safe practices, they seem unnecessary until the deviation becomes a new normal. And that's where researchers cite normalization of deviancy as the primary factors in loss of the Challenger and the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Now, culture can magnify normalization by failing to correct the deviation or even encouraging it. Oh, you had to do that in training, but nobody really does that here. That should be something that you're wondering about. Why wouldn't I want to do that? So it's a normalization of deviance. It's particularly common in endeavors such as scuba diving, which didn't have redundant safety practices to account for unintended or random human error. Nothing goes wrong because a redundancy accounts for the deviation. Till one day, the redundant factor is accidentally omitted too, like your bailout tank or checking your bailout regulator. If you find yourself skipping things you learned to do in training, such as pre-dive safety checks, exceeding limits, such as diving deeper than you were trained, or just for a moment I'm going to enter that overhead environment, or I'm just going to look into that ship just a little bit, or omitting gear you're trained to always have, such as surface signaling devices. You're then exhibiting normalization of deviance. If you and your buddies reinforce these behaviors, you're in a microculture that is normalizing deviation. Because experience can reinforce normalization of deviance, experience is only a cure if something bad happens due to the deviation. And even then, some divers go right back to the unsafe practice. The cure and prevention are self-discipline to follow your training honestly and about the safety of your diving behaviors. Refuse to listen to others, sometimes more experienced, who encourage deviations. And from that little verbalization, do you find yourself in any of those situations?
I hope I don't, but it's hard not to. If you let that little thing go, like sometimes I've got like a leak on the inflator, and you're like, it's not that much.
Right, because if we're in the river, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had that on the Ann Arbor 5,
Oh yeah,
it ain't the same.
no, yeah,
And how often will we justify one and not the other? And does that follow us into making a mistake?
yeah, yeah. Something can happen. Well, thank you for that. Something always to learn from each of those. Yeah. So you're back. So now, say hello.
Hello, I'm back.
There you
Power
go.
glitch.
Yeah.
Just poof, I'm gone. At least, like I said, I finished the article.
Yeah, you did, and I was just talking and trying to fill some space. So as it's going to happen, we'll have a little bit of editing going on. But like to thank everybody who's listened to the program. We certainly appreciate it. If you're enjoying the program, and you're in that situation where you have a little bit extra funds and you're getting some value, head on over to our website, www.scubaobsessed.com. Ignore how old the posts are, because I do need to, now that we've got this fixed, get some more current posts and talk about it. But here on the right, you'll see this Patreon link. Oh, I'm talking about it, and you can't even see it. So here we go. I got to remember to edit that. So you go to visit the website. We got Patreon link here on the side. And then we've got a variety of plans. And you can even enter in your own dollar amount. You don't have to stick to one of these. We're currently not doing anything special other than if you contribute $3 or more, you get early access to our show notes, which is kind of like a curated news related to scuba diving. So you get those in advance and you can follow along. And you also will hear about things we're doing. We have some behind the scenes activities that we'll probably put in there now that we're doing video. You can do some of that. So thank you once again for supporting the program. Mac, do you have anything that you would like to plug before we?
Nothing at this time. Anybody would like to get out there, I'd like to hit the river this Saturday in Niles. If we have some people there, maybe high noonish.
Yeah.
It's hard to zip up a bag zipper on the Drysuit without somebody being there. And I don't like to use the spectators. They may not always get it totally shut.
Well, if that's one way you have to replace the zippers in your Drysuit more frequently, is have people who don't know how to zip a suit try that for you. Or maybe even better, don't zip it completely. a little bit dangling out there at the end. So, did I lose you, Mac?
No, I'm
okay.
sitting down here waiting for the jokes.
Waiting. So I do have, as I've been doing lately, I have a series of them. Maybe we'll try and keep it to just a couple. People haven't complained, so it either means nobody's listening, and we know we got at least 2 listeners. And graduation going on. My daughter recently graduated, so I've thought maybe that might be a nice topic for the jokes for this week. So I was surprised when a friend said he'll work at KFC right after graduation. Out of curiosity, I asked him why. All he said, well, it's on my bucket list. Yeah, so we'll do another one here. When future children ask me about my high school graduation and how I answer, the graduation was great, but the reception was terrible. I don't even know if the kids are even going to get that one. Johnny hands in his graduation test. The test was so bad, the only thing his professor could write in it was idiot. He handed it to Johnny. Johnny looked at the test and asked the professor, "Can you please grade my test? You only signed it."
That's going to help them a lot.
Well, okay, maybe this is the one to wrap us out. When I graduated from high school, I was so poor I couldn't even afford college, so my parents sent me to a dog training school. I learned a lot when I was there: sit, stay, roll over. I haven't quite got the fetching part down. They say I'm a little rough around the edges.
Where are our contributors at? We need some help here.
Okay, well, here's the last one. My son just graduated from college. My friends asked me what he majored in. I told him he studied to be an astronaut. He took up space. So.
As long as you don't got to go into details.
Yes. So on that note, go out there and get wet.
And stay safe. I was going to say, don't do that normalization of deviance.
Yeah.